Uh, the topic given to me is the subject that I've been working on for the last 15, 16 years, unraveling Indian mythology. So first, let's define this word, mythology, because when you say this word mythology, it upsets a lot of people. The reason they get upset is because the definition in most people's mind is a definition which comes from the 1950s and 60s or much earlier, where myth was equated with falsehood. So naturally, when somebody says, I'm going to talk about Indian mythology, they think I'm talking about something false. So that's a valid reason to get upset. But in the 1950s and especially in the 1970s, a great revolution took place in the world of literature. It's called postmodernism. And that, with that understanding, the word myth came to be redefined. It came to be redefined as subjective truth. So myth basically means a truth which is subjective. Now, let me explain this with a very famous story which everybody has heard as children. Once upon a time, there were two brothers. One was Ganesha and the other was Kartikeya. There were two brothers and they decided to go on a race 3 times around the world. And the story, as you all know, Kartikeya goes around the mountains, the oceans, the planets. And Ganesha goes around his parents. And Ganesha says, I won. And Kartikeya says, how come? And this is the answer Ganesha gives Kartikeya. You went around your world, the objective world of mountains, oceans, planets, continents. I went around my world, the world of my thoughts, dreams, imagination, ideas. What matters more? Now, if I were to ask the question, you realize that there are 2 worlds that we inhabit all the time. There is the world of things, the world of mountains, oceans, planets, the world of physics, chemistry, biology. There's another world we occupy, the world which is inside our mind, the world which is accessed through psychology, the world of imagination, the world of dreams, the world of ideas, the world of feelings, the world of emotions, the world, the way we see the inner world. What matters more? Does the inner world matter or the outer world matter? A very simple way to explain this. The outer world is the subject that we study mostly in science. The inner world enters the realm of mythology, of myths, of imagination. Now, how do I study this world? Because it is intangible. It is subjective. How do I enter your mind? How do I understand your mind? How does a psychologist understand your mind? How does he get there? And there is only 3 ways in which I can access your mind. I can access your mind through stories that you tell, symbols that you choose to show, and rituals that you perform. Stories, symbols, rituals. All 3 things are 3 types of tangible things through which I get access to your inner world. Now, this is true for an individual, this is true for a community, this is true for anybody. So when I'm studying mythology, I study the stories, symbols and rituals that enable me to understand the subjective truth of a person, a community, an organization, anything, any group of people, I can understand through the stories, symbols and rituals that they follow. So, how do I know? When we use the word mythology, the assumption is I'm talking about something religious or spiritual, which is not true. It's a language. There's something called secular mythology. Let me explain this. India as an idea, the Indian nation state or the Republic of India, a child is not born with this knowledge. But this knowledge is constructed or designed in his inner world through stories, symbols and rituals. We tell the child the story of the Indian freedom struggle. We tell the child, that is a story, a narrative that he hears. Then we tell the child about symbols like the Indian national flag, the national animal, the national bird, And then we'd have rituals like Independence Day, Republic Day. And we're told when the national anthem is sung, you have to stand up. And by doing this again and again and again, gradually the child starts to appreciate that there's something special about this concept called India. Now, does India exist in nature? It doesn't. It is a political entity constructed by... If there were no human beings, would India exist? No. It's human beings who have created this idea, and we communicate it through stories, symbols, and rituals. Now, for hundreds and thousands of years, they've communicated different kinds of ideas. So mythology is not a religious concept only. It is also a religious concept. It is also a secular concept. It applies to the nation state. It applies to organizations. So when somebody says Infosys, now when you go to Infosys, you will observe they will have a story that they will talk about the origin of Infosys. They'll have symbols of Infosys, the photographs that they value, the rituals that they value. They will have special Infosys Day, Founders Day. Certain things are sacred in that space. You are supposed to follow the business in this way. You're not supposed to do that way. And that constructs in your mind an idea called Infosys. The same idea can be applied to branding, management, so many other topics. It's a vast topic by itself. There are different words. People try to understand mythology using different words. Some words are like discourse is used. Semiotics is used. Different words are used. And that's the world of mythology. Which brings me to, well, then what is Indian mythology? Now, I use it very specifically. I use it for stories, symbols, and rituals that communicate, that have one assumption which is unique only to the Indian subcontinent. It is the idea of rebirth. Nowhere else in the world does this idea exist or originate. Spread to China via Buddhism. But Chinese thought essentially in its fundamental form, which is Confucius thought and Taoist thoughts, does not have the idea of rebirth. It comes and Buddhism didn't enter China very happily. It faced a lot of problems over 1,000 years and gradually got assimilated. And the Buddhism which reached China is a very Chinese version. It is not Theravada Buddhism which you find in Sri Lanka, for example. It is Mahayana Buddhism. It is not Vajrayana which you find in Tibet. So it's a very different, very particular, which suits the psychology of the Chinese civilization. So what happens when you talk about Indian mythology, it is stories where rebirth is assumed. Three major such religions exist. Jainism, Buddhism, and for want of a better word, Hinduism. Now, all three religions identify themselves as with the word known as Sanatan, which basically means timeless, which cannot be locked in history or geography. Now, the problem is these words have become highly political. And because they become highly political, people don't see the purity of the idea. And I'm personally not interested in politics because it doesn't help anyone. The idea is to focus on the thought. That is what excites me as a person. I was excited by the idea that this storytelling, because people would tell me, Greek mythology is so similar to Indian mythology. We have Indra, who has thunderbolts like Vajra, and Greeks have Zeus, the god of thunder. And I would look at it, and when I would read the Greek epics, the Odyssey, the Iliad, the Virgil's Aeneid, when you read about Hercules, you read the stories, you realize that the bhav or the emotion of the storytelling is very, very different from Ramayana and Mahabharata. So what is the similarity people saw? They were looking at a very superficial similarity. Every culture personified various parts of nature and culture as gods and goddesses. That's superficial. The depth mattered. What was the deeper idea? Greek mythology is based on the notion that you live only once. And because you live, and the implications are huge. When you believe you live only once, then that one life is very precious. You want to live the life the right way, the correct way. And you have to achieve something great in your life. Because there is only one life, you will not get a second chance. And therefore I become achievement focused. I have a sense of urgency in my life. I want to achieve things because the value of my life is equal to the sum total of achievements. The same principle applies to biblical mythology, where you live only once. And when you live only once, then achievements matter, You have to live that one life perfectly. And therefore the notion of being right, being good, very matters a lot. But when you apply a rebirth paradigm, a very different approach to life emerges. It says the denominator of your life is infinity. When the denominator of your life is infinity, no matter what you do, the value of your life is zero. So whether you're a king or a servant, a criminal, anything, the value is zero. Then what is the point of life? And that is a very different structure. Let me explain this how it happens in storytelling. A most popular story I'm telling you from Jain mythology. In Jain mythology there is a story of a man called Bharat, after whom India is called Bharat. And he conquers the world, and after he conquers the world, he goes to the top of a mountain. He wants to hoist a flag to say the world that I was the first conqueror. But when he reaches the mountain top, he finds a flag. The mountain is covered with many flags, millions of flags. Each flag has something written on it. It is written by a man who said, I thought I had conquered the world. But when I reached this mountain top, I realized I was one of infinite. And I realized I was foolish. Such a story, look at this is Jain mythology. It's not Hindu mythology, this is Jain mythology. But you understand what I'm saying. I don't know how many Jains are in this room, but you understand what he's talking about. The king is being told that your life, even if you're the greatest and most powerful man in the world, you don't matter. So then what is the point of life? Then the point of life is to understand. Sit down and ask yourself, what is the point of life? So introspection becomes an important part of your life, not achievement. And therefore you find what we call Indian thought, Western thought. That is the fundamental divide. When we say that the West is very achievement driven, so you have just do it. And Indian thought will be, why? Why do you want to do it? Do it. Nobody's stopping you from doing it. But please ask why. Which means you have to start thinking. But thinking is a very difficult thing for human beings. We think thinking is something easy, but it's extremely difficult. Why is it difficult? Because it demands, and I'm talking now purely scientifically. When you think, your brain requires glucose. Any activity that demands glucose is naturally resisted. So you will notice if I ask the people in this room, do you exercise regularly? They will say no. Because exercise is tough, because again, early stages of exercise requires glucose and the body resists. We don't want to use glucose, a precious fuel. We don't want to think. Thinking frightens us. Because when we start thinking, we suddenly realize that really our life has no purpose. We realize that even if I die at this moment, the world will continue. And that's a very scary thought. I don't want to think. I want to do. Don't think. Because the whole fear that really life will go on. The richest man in the world will disappear at this moment. Nothing is going to happen to the world. The most powerful man in the world right now at this moment will disappear. Nothing will happen to the world. That thought is very scary. I don't want to think. And yet the purpose of the civilization is think, think, think. Ask why. And that is the fundamental difference. And when I was unraveling Indian mythology, I said, oh, these are the stories. This is what the stories are. Because when I would read typically a Ramayana and Mahabharata, I would read interpretations and the way people would present, and it's been happening for a long time, and I'd say, something is missing. Something is missing in the narration. The Ramayana is very popular. People love to read Ramayana. And I'll say, I always ask people, so who do you prefer, Ram or Krishna? And everybody will say, oh, Ram is so boring, Krishna is so wonderful. And suddenly I say, but what is the difference? And they say, no, Ram is straight-jacketed, Maryada, Purushottam, Ram, rule follower. Krishna is a risk taker, Leela, Purushottam. He breaks the rules. See how he's innovative, he's creative. And I keep asking, so what's the difference between Ram and Krishna? And they say they're different. I said, are they different or are they the same? Because have you read Vishnu Puran? Vishnu Puran says both are the avatars of the same person. They're not two different people, they're not two different stories. They're two chapters of the same story. There is no difference between Ram and Krishna. They're the same human being in different contexts. Ram is Vishnu in Treta Yuga. Krishna is Vishnu in Dwapara Yuga. Two different people in two different situations behaving differently. But they are not different people. They are adapting to the environment they are in. Are you the same person at home and the same person in the office? In front of your boss you behave differently. In front of your wife you behave differently. In front of your driver you behave differently. These are your many avatars. And who are you really? Are you the one in front of the door? Who sees the real you? And then you realize, does the mirror tell me the real you? When I look into the mirror? And then you realize, no, even in front of the mirror, am I seeing myself? Or am I seeing my imagination of myself? What is real? And these are the questions Indian thought would ask. So suddenly Ramayana and Mahabharata cannot be seen in isolation. You cannot see Ramayana in isolation, and that's the biggest discovery of mine. I suddenly realized we are taught to think like the West, which is look at things in isolation, not in a context. So look at the tiger without looking at the jungle. You cannot understand the tiger unless you understand the jungle. You cannot understand the fish unless you understand the water. You have to understand the environment. Ramayana makes no sense without the Mahabharata. Mahabharata makes no sense without the Ramayana. One talks about rule following, the other talks about rule breaking. Neither of these makes sense unless you read the Vishnu Puran, which talks about a householder's life. Because a householder is sometimes to follow the rules, sometimes to break the rules. And the Vishnu Puran does not make sense unless you read Shiva Puran. Because a householder, a sansaric person, has no meaning unless you study a hermit, an ascetic, a tapasvi. And when you see a hermit who says, I don't want the life of bhog, I only want yoga. And on the other side you have a householder who says, no, I enjoy bhog, I don't want yoga. You understand the human condition. And therefore you have to read Brahma Puran, which talks about the human dilemmas, our desires, the God who shall not be worshipped. Because he is not able to decide whether he wants to be hermit or householder, and he is not good at either. And you don't understand human beings, you don't understand Brahma Puran unless you read Devi Puran, because human beings make no sense unless you understand nature, Prakriti. And nature is about animals and plants and minerals. And you realize that human beings are not like other animals, other living creatures, because we can imagine, we can think. Animals can't do that. So Brahma Puran makes sense only when you read Devi Puran. And both of them put together forms what is known as the Agama literature, which is the temple texts. And Agama literature makes no sense unless you read Nigama literature, which is Vedic texts. And Vedic text makes no sense unless you read Buddhism and Jainism, or what is known as Shramana literature, which explains the same idea without looking at the idea of God. Because neither the Buddhists nor the Jains have the concept of Ishvara. And therefore they have explained exactly the same ideas using a very different model. And all of these books make up Indian mythology, the karmic literature, where the assumption, one thing which is common in all these books is you live many times. You live many times, and is that real or is that a concept? You'll never know. How does it matter? But it impacts your life. Because when I live many, many times, I always have a second chance. There is always a second chance, which means I can always forgive. I can always say it's okay if you made a mistake. It's okay. You don't have to be right. You don't have to look down upon a person who's wrong. You will learn to adjust. And Indians are very good at adjusting. We tolerate things. There's a pothole on the road, we'll go around the pothole. And nowadays people think that's a very bad thing. We say, no, we should not tolerate. We should be intolerant. Intolerance is a good thing. Because then our roads will be clean and we'll have an organized society. We'll be a very organized society, but we'll also be an intolerant society. We are too busy being right and wrong. This is right and that is wrong. Which means we will exclude people who don't agree with us. That's not healthy for any organization, for any community. The notion, and we're becoming that, increasingly we're saying, I want to exclude people who don't agree with me. Because that is the right way. I am right, you are wrong. I don't want to be part of such a society, and I don't think society can survive that way. Society is noble when it includes people. When it says, I don't agree with you, but I'm willing to live with you. And I'm going to work hard to live with you. How do I do that? How do I live? In my neighbor's house is a Muslim family, and I am a vegetarian. And he is going to perform Bakri Eid every year. How will I live there? And that's the great challenge. When we look at each other, a very simple Indian concept, darshan karo. I look at him and I say, that's his religion. Let him follow it. And he looks at me and says, he's uncomfortable with some of my rituals, so let me perform it in such a way that he doesn't feel uncomfortable. So we will adjust. You adjust for me, I will adjust for you. We are forgetting this. Increasingly we think of these words as a root of corruption. Anything associated remotely with Indian ideas is associated as wrong. So an entire generation is being told, be embarrassed by India. India is embarrassing. And I feel that's such a tragedy. Because this is also human inheritance. It doesn't belong only to the Indian subcontinent. It belongs to the world. There are wonderful ideas that need to be shared with the world. And therefore, unraveling Indian mythology becomes important. The stories, the symbols, the rituals that we perform, for better or for worse, have been transmitted over generations for thousands of years, and most of the time we don't know why we are doing it. And what is the good thing about it? People say, mindless ritualism. That's a word which you use. But remember, because somebody meticulously follows it, even I can see the ritual which somebody saw 1,000 years ago. Which means the transmission is so accurate, without change. The person doesn't understand it, but he ensures its flawless transmission. And that flawless transmission allows me to decode the story very well, because I see its purity. And I am able to say, that's what they're saying. That's the bhavartha, not shabdartha. Shabdartha is the literal meaning. Bhavartha is the emotional meaning. And when I understand it, I also realize that, I can't share this meaning with anyone else. This is my meaning, I have understood it. With the other person, I have to ensure he sees the ritual in its pure form. And therefore, the rituals are mindless. There is value to mindlessness also. Not everything can be understood by everyone. But transmission ensures that generations will see the same thing, and out of 100 people, one person may turn out to be very wise. And he will say, I don't need rituals. But he'll say, I may not need rituals, but my child may not be so wise. He needs the ritual. And out of those 100 people, 50 people will never understand. Which is okay. There's another life. In his next life he'll understand. What's the hurry? Everybody doesn't have to be Einstein in one life. But all of us will one day be Einstein. Or maybe we are Einstein in a particular context. I may not be great at work, but I might be great at home. I may be at home and I'm just the person who cooks the best idlis in the world. Is that a bad thing? We have decided not to give it value. But it is valuable. Ask the person who enjoys the idlis. When that person goes away, that taste will go away with that person. Because you can never reproduce it again. And these are the ideas which are there in India. It's how you read the stories. And I have been fortunate enough to get access to them. And really I've got access to them because most of them have been translated in English, which is not an Indian language. I always tell people, there are Ramayana in India written in every language in India. So to read all the Ramayans, I have to know all the Indian languages or English. Because if I know English, I can read translations of all of them. No other language. And therefore I'm grateful to the British. I'm grateful for them to allowing me access to, how many of you all would have read Bhavartha Ramayana Marathi? Or Dandi Ramayana in Odia? Or Tulsi Ramayana in Hindi? or Giridhar Ramayana in Gujarati, or a Ramayana in Malayalam, or in Tamil, or in Kannada, unless I know the language? How do I get access to it? It's because of English. So see, even there's something wonderful in English, something to learn. Everything which comes because the British came into India, I can always say, oh my God, the culture got destroyed. Or was it saved? Because now I read Ramayana in each and every language. It will not be the same, it will never be as good as the original. But I can't spend my lifetime learning 24 languages. I just can't. I don't have that time and patience. Maybe in next life, yes. But in this life, if I want to read all the Ramayans, English brings value. And so everything has value in this world. Everything has to be included like a thali. We have to mix and match and decide which part of the thali we like. Everything is good. The rice is good, the rotis are good, the ghee is good, the sambar is good, the chutney is good, the papad is good. Tomorrow somebody will say, no, along with that, why don't you keep some bread and butter? Fine, keep it. And how do you see it in temples? If you go to Srinathji temple in Rajasthan, there is a Vesha known as Mughal Vesha. He is dressed like a Mughal soldier. There is another Vesha known as Malecha Vesha, dress of a barbarian. There is another Vesha known as Yavana Vesha, basically the Englishman's dress. So they keep creating dresses. Now apparently they're trying to create Veshas for modern, the fashion designers want to do it. Because Srinathji wears 8 different clothes every day of the year. So 8 into 365. That much costumes he needs and he'll never repeat the dress again. So you include. Everybody's clothes are included. He even dresses up as a woman sometimes. He dresses up like a tribal. All kinds are allowed. So I think these are the ideas through symbols and rituals they try to communicate, but we don't appreciate them for what they communicate. At least I felt that people were not appreciating that. And that was one of my motivations to write these stories and books and my essays. And I have not done it because I believe I'm going to save the world. Nobody can. The world will survive without me. But it is because it's so much fun, so much joy when you do the storytelling. And I'm just lucky that somewhere along the line I met people who funded me. You know, everybody talks about Marwadi business being ruthless and stingy. Who funds me? A Marwadi businessman who asks me no questions, pays me a very fat salary and says, don't come to office, okay. So there it is in India, the Marwadi businessman known for his ruthlessness, funding me to unravel Indian mythology. And that's the wonder of India. And I hope we all appreciate it. Thank you.
We'll now just throw the floor open for questions. So, any questions? Yeah.
I am one of these ardent reader of your articles, and many times I have used it in my own organization and many talks without paying you any royalty. I hope you permit me that.
He's tolerant.
The average age of the audience here is around 50, and you are talking to this audience, and you talked about rituals. And as I see it, whether these rituals will remain, and are you talking like this to the grandchildren of these people who are assembled here? Because what is going to happen to the rituals in the coming years?
You know, I come from the city of Bombay. And Bombay is a very commercial city. 10 years ago, I've lived there all my life. I've never seen 10 years ago, there's a very famous temple called Siddhivinayak temple. And anybody who goes to Bombay thinks that it's the most important temple in India. At least in Bombay. When my mother migrated, my parents migrated there, it was a little garden temple. Where she used to go, after buying vegetables, she used to go to rest. And this is the Ganpati temple. Today it is a massive infrastructure temple. Where it's the most important and everybody from Amitabh Bachchan to Ekta Kapoor goes there. On Monday nights, you will see people walking barefoot to the temple from every part of Bombay. This ritual did not exist 10 years ago. Today it is a big event in Bombay. Let's walk to Siddhivinayak. Who started this? Nobody knows. Why did they start? Nobody knows. It is happening. So rituals will die, but rituals will also come. We are just not seeing it in in front of our eyes, and so we imagine rituals that I have been performing may stop. But someone else has started new rituals. Because the ritual is the idea is important. The idea that he is, for whatever reason, believing that by that act of walking to the temple, he's displaying